Hi there, I'm Jim Zirin. Welcome back to More Conversations. New York Times bestselling author Nina Burleigh is with us. In 2018, Nina wrote a riveting book entitled Golden Handcuffs, The Secret History of Trump's Women, dealing with Donald Trump's sordid relations with the opposite sex. Since then, courts and juries have found that Trump inspired an insurrection, defamed a journalist whom he sexually abused in a department store dressing room, engaged in a scheme to defraud, for which he was fined $500 million, mishandled classified documents, and was guilty of 34 felony offenses involving a hush money payment to a porn star. Nevertheless, Trump's MAGA base strangely has stayed with him, and he has received the endorsement of leading Republicans as his fundraising has surged. Nina recently inaugurated a weekly newsletter called American Freak Show to follow Trump and keep an eye on MAGA extremism and its absurdity. We are pleased to welcome Nina Burleigh to the program.
Thank you. Glad to be here, Jim.
Well, delighted to see you again. Now, you've written roughly 10 books?
7.
7
well,
books.
8 or 9 if you count the anthologies.
Okay, so why a blog?
And I have a novel coming out.
And a novel coming out. What's the novel called?
Zero Visibility Possible.
Zero Visibility Possible. Well, I look forward to that. Now, let me ask you, having written 7 books and a novel coming out, why have you turned to doing a blog, a Substack?
Well, I started Substacking about a year ago now, right after the Washington Monthly magazine published photographs of a Texas real estate magnate's Nazi linens collection. His name is Harlan Crow. He's the, they call him the Trump of Dallas, but
he's the funder of Clarence Thomas.
He's the timeshare owner of the Supreme Court, basically. He's a big funder of Clarence Thomas. And I saw the pictures and I just thought, these people are freaks. This is not, and I first tweeted, somebody really needs to start a podcast called American Freak Show and just start talking about how strange these people and how abnormal they are. And then I thought, well, maybe I should try it. So I started the Substack, and I wasn't going to keep doing it weekly, but I started to get followers and subscribers, and then I realized that I had an audience, and I kept, as many of the Substack writers do, realized that it's actually kind of fun. So I have been writing one every week for over a year now. Sometimes I do 2 a week, and
that's when you get mad.
When I get mad, but I have to even, you know, I mean, there's always a low simmer going now. Yeah, every week there is some new freak or abnormality to focus on. And I really started it just to remind people that this is not normal. And it hasn't been normal for a while. And to try to remind people that if you feel like things are not normal and these people are not normal, you're right. This is not normal. It's not the civil discourse that the framers of the Constitution had in mind. It's not the way that politics has worked in my time covering it since Springfield. I started in Springfield, Illinois years and years ago, and then Washington, and the debasement of the discourse, the vulgarity, the cruelty for fun that Trump instituted or brought into the system, not normal. And a lot of what the MAGAs do is...
It's almost sadistic.
Well, of course, you know, yes, it's very sadistic. And I'm not going to do pop psychology, although it's fun to sort of play around with that. But let's just remember that, you know, when they start saying these, you know, let's say the verdict, the guilty verdict in the first felony convictions, when the MAGAs say, you know, this is banana republic behavior, you're trying to lock him up, and of course he's walking around saying they want to lock me up and they want to kill me.
All false.
All false, but also they, you know, let's remember who first started saying they wanted to lock up their political opponent.
But they have him dead to rights.
Well, I was in the stadium in the Cleveland at the Cleveland Republican National Convention in 2016 when General Michael Flynn got up there and led a chant, led thousands of people chanting, lock her up, talking about Hillary Clinton. They wanted to jail the opponent. And that was the beginning. And that they started that. And, like all schoolyard bullies, they blame somebody else for what they've started. And so that's really where we're at.
Okay, lock her up. It's kind of a statement of misogyny. And one of the areas you've covered so avidly as subjects is women. And Jennifer Rubin in today's Washington Post said the GOP is waging war against women, and it's not just abortion, it's intra vitro fertilization. Now it's come to contraception. Do you agree with that? Is the GOP and Trump, are they waging war against women?
Absolutely. But, that was a slogan that the Democrats were using all the way back in, I think, even in the Obama years, right? The war on women, the war on women. And I think it's just become more and more obvious that that is the motivating force behind really the whole movement. The overturning of Roe was just the beginning of this wholesale effort to turn women back into baby-making, breeders, and kitchen help, and that's part of the "Make America Great Again" concept, which is completely false. I mean, women after World War II, there was in this country, there was the beginning of a affordable daycare operation because a lot of women went to work during World War II while the men were at war. And as soon as they came back, this is Rosie the Riveter. Yeah, as soon as they came back, those women were kicked out of their jobs. I was just talking to somebody yesterday whose mother lost her journalism job after World War II, and they dismantled this program to help families, really, and to force women back into their childbearing, what naturally women are supposed to be doing. Meanwhile, in the last 20 or 30 years, more women have started to go to college than men, a lot more women. And that's making a huge difference in society, that and the birth control pill and abortion, because it allowed women, for really the first time in history, to say, well, I'll decide when I have a baby, and I'll go to work. And that is a gigantic shift in the power relations between men and women. And some men, we now understand from Trump's rise, significant minority, I think, but still significant number, are just reeling from that. And that explains the rise of Trump. It explains the rise of people like Andrew Tate, these horrific, like hyper-masculine organizations like the Proud Boys, openly fascist, but celebrating this kind of ultra-masculinity that is really a reaction to the many gains that women made in terms of being in the public square, being educated, and still, in fact, women do not control very much. I mean, there are a lot more educated women, college-educated women, but the number of women who are running, let's say, corporations, minuscule. Silicon Valley, the digital revolution, completely iced out women. All of the money, all of the big money is controlled by men out there. Silicon Valley.
Well, you do have of the Fortune 500 companies, 52 have female CEOs. So there's been improvements since 2016.
There's been movement, and those types of movements moving the needle even that much, I think just provoked this reaction. And that's what Trump's...
Nina, in 2020, 40 some odd percent of white women voted for Trump. And if women want to assert their power, one way to do it is through the vote. How do you account for that?
Well, I address some of that in my book, although I don't get deeply into that vote issue. Yeah, it's disgusting that 40% of white women went for Trump. And in 2016, I think it was a majority. It wasn't a majority as reported immediately afterwards, but it was a large percentage, like in the 40s. But I address in the book, I actually found that to be one of the central mysteries of, the book is about the women closest to Trump, the three wives, mother, grandmother, and Ivanka. And then it kind of goes out, I go out further into the women who will, the women you see at Mar-a-Lago, the pictures that come out, they just adore him. And I think it's a...
But how are they dressed? They're totally sexified. They all seem to wear the same uniform.
There's a lot of plastic. And yeah, I mean, the costumes are amazing. I mean, you're on Twitter too, and you see that sometimes you see, I guess Ron Filipkowski is constantly posting those, last night at Mar-a-Lago, and you just can't believe what they're wearing. Part of it is Florida. I mean, it's Florida.
It's Florida
woman. It's Florida woman, and then Texas, I guess. But the plastic is what's so mind blowing. The idea that women have to look a certain way, and again, that's the Trump woman. So the reason why I came to the conclusion, the reason why women associate themselves with that type of an operation is that the rewards, if you climb the ladder within that system, the rewards are immense. So let's say somebody like Elise Stefanik, our congresswoman here in New York, who originally originally loathed Trump, and it's on the record.
A liberal Republican.
She was a moderate Republican. And like J.D. Vance, they are on the record in 2016 appalled, and now you see her vying for his, the coronation to become a vice president. She's one of his biggest supporters. And they pay, these women are willing to undergo just levels of humiliation that other women will not put up with in order to get close to power and money.
But will it help him, you think, if he names a woman as his running mate?
I think it would.
Assuming she hasn't recently murdered a dog?
Yes, or that's right, murdered a dog. Probably that's the only challenge. Nikki, what's her name? Kristi Noem will not be selected, obviously, because of the puppy. But I think it would help him if he got a woman next to him. I would be
Would women buy into that? Would they?
I think, well, look, we know, if you're following politics, you understand in this country right now that there's a sliver of voters that will decide, a tiny percentage of the larger, the great mass of voting Americans who will decide the election. And it's hard to imagine that there are people who are undecided. That's what we used to call them, or they call themselves independent. I always say when somebody says they're independent, they're probably Trumpers. But I think that the felony conviction, a lot of these voters are low information. They're not dumb. They're just not paying attention like we are. And good for them. They have things that are going on in their world. They don't watch MSNBC, or maybe they catch up to Fox a little bit, but they're not immersed in. They're not knowledgeable about everything that Trump has done. The civil trials, the Trump U thing, which was a total scam on vulnerable Americans, which he did end up paying $25 million to the New York Attorney General, who sued him for fraud. Those people, this all just kind of goes into the big dump truck of Trump, and people forget it if they ever paid attention to it. But when you hear felony conviction, I think the Times poll in October, which again, it's a long time ago, did find that a certain percentage of these people in swing states, but a significant enough number of people, when that kind of thing when it penetrates their awareness, which it does, felony conviction is going to penetrate, that those people who are sort of in the middle on the fence will think, forget it. I can't vote for a convicted felon. That's just not what we do. The MAGAs are already, all of this criminality is baked in. They have obviously accepted that their hero is a victimized, martyred, superhero. I mean, the second coming or the third coming of Jesus or whatever. You see the memes. They actually think that he's leading them to the promised land, and that everything that's happening to him is he's the scapegoat. He's taking on their sins. I mean, that's so he's.
But he's likened himself not only to Jesus, but to Mother Teresa and to Al Capone.
Well, just throw it all out. Throw it all. Look, it's kind of brilliant. It's kind of brilliant what he does. I mean, he does. Throw it at the wall and see what sticks. Right? Absolutely shameless. He said something yesterday. He'll deny it. He didn't say that. And again, people like that energy. It's a sideshow. It's a circus. I think the Trump rallies are like Grateful Dead concerts. They're attracting it's a big tent. Fascism is a big tent, and that's why you see all kinds of people showing up at these rallies. And that he's bragging now that he can get Latino votes and he can get black votes because of his conviction, which is such a crazy racist thing to say. True that more black men are incarcerated percentage-wise than whites in this country. But for him to try to sell himself to that cohort, the convicted of felony cohort, it's outrageous.
Well,
I mean, the
black voters are certainly going to be more nuanced than that. They're not going to say that because a friend of theirs stood trial and was convicted and was incarcerated.
Well, but they're
identify
openly
with Trump.
No, but they're openly saying that. I mean, that's what I wrote about last week, as you know. I mean, Eric Trump, the day
that's
after
what Eric Trump
conviction,
claimed, but they'll claim anything.
They'll claim anything, but I think that there is some truth to the idea that, look, what he really, again, going back to my first point, who he really appeals to are these resentful or disappointed men, really of all races, who are latching on to this hyper masculinity, ultra masculine kind of movement that he really represents. And so among that, among black men and among Latino men, there certainly are men who are attracted to that. And in fact, I think that especially the Latino vote, the Republicans are making inroads because those people are more religious. They're more Catholic. I mean, the super in my building in 2020, uptown New York, middle class guy. I'm voting for Trump. Why? Well, I don't want babies killed.
That's the answer.
That was the answer.
Do you think choice, and we have the issue of choice because Roe v. Wade was overturned since the 2020 election, but do you think that's going to tilt the balance of the election? And
well, it certainly has. As you know, it certainly has since then. I mean, they haven't won big. The red wave did not materialize in 2022.
I mean, Nancy Pelosi thinks it's going to be a major factor. Do you see it as
I
that?
think, well, especially now that they're openly going after things like IVF and IUDs and the pill. I think that, I think women will come out and vote against him. It's just a matter of, again, what the Democrats need to do is bring, half the country doesn't vote at all, or some huge percentage, I don't know what it is. And the abortion issue, like the felony conviction, I think, wakes people up who maybe aren't interested in voting. And I think there is a motivated cohort of women in this country who are disgusted, appalled, and I think that they will come out, and they have come out in the past, and that, that accounts for a lot of things that were happening in Michigan and Wisconsin, right? I mean, Michigan is at the top, has been run by women. It's like a Scandinavian country, right? Whitmer and the Attorney General is a female, and they're all Democrats, and I think they wiped the floor with those crazy right-wing legislators there in Michigan, and that is related to abortion. So they're going to come out, and that's why I think if he puts a woman next to him, like an Elise Stefanik, who's smart.
Went to Harvard.
Which is just
That
so
doesn't make you
mind-boggling.
smart.
I guess not, right? But she has the pedigree. And more than that, she kind of looks a certain, kind of like every woman. I think that would be a pretty significant move in the right direction.
Well, there's another one.
And then whoever that person is going to debate Kamala Harris, remember, so that it'll be quite interesting if they put a woman up.
Well, there's another woman to be taken into account, because in preparation for the sentencing on July 11, Trump is being interviewed virtually by a probation officer.
I love that.
And that probation officer happens to be a woman.
I love it.
Now, what questions do you think she should ask him, and what do you think her reaction is likely to be?
Well, I mean, I think she has to ask him about his travel plans. She has to ask him about whether he would wear an ankle bracelet. Will she ask him about the Billy Bush tapes and his propensity for sexual assault?
She'll ask him about these other proceedings, the E. Jean Carroll case.
And E. Jean Carroll.
And the assault on the Capitol.
And the assault on the Capitol, and the fraud. This guy has, you're a New Yorker, a lifetime of skirting the law, not paying his final bills, destroying small vendors, and basically just acting in the manner that Roy Cohn taught him to act, which was bend the law, know the judge, better to know the judge than the law. That's a Roy Cohn
screw the law,
motto,
who's the judge?
and never apologize. And, just keep bullying your way forward. And I think that's what he learned well and he was an apt pupil, but he's naturally capable of doing that kind of thing. So yeah, I hope she asks him about all of the criminality. But more than that, I think it's going to be quite interesting to see whether Judge Merchan gives him jail time. He won't go to jail. For sure, he won't go to jail before the election. But just to have that hanging over his head, convicted felon, and you're going to go to jail when you're out of the White House, I think that would get people's attention. And it will enrage the base. So part of what's going on here is the Democrats, I think, are very concerned that he's able to use this victimization and martyrization concept, the weaponized government lawfare thing, to his advantage. But I think they need to be constantly talking about it. It's really all they've got are the women and his criminality. And if they can keep pounding on that, I think they get more non-committed, inattentive voters paying attention to the absolute outrage of what this guy is.
And what about his threats against witnesses, jurors, prosecutors? And
I think Maggie Haberman today, there was some quote saying, you need to take that seriously. Like, she's the Trump whisperer at the New York Times, right? She said, these revenge plans are not a joke. They will, already they're using litigation terrorism on people like Rick Wilson, who's being sued by Mike Flynn, right?
Right.
They're using litigation terrorism constantly. And, Melania went after me in the UK over the book. It's people with deep pockets coming after journalists. You're going to see a lot more of that. And imagine adding, that's private. Those are private lawsuits. They're civil, they're defamation cases by people who are individuals. Imagine that magnified into the whole Department of Justice going after people for some kind of infraction in terms of how they talk about the president or his policies in a way that they don't like. Imagine having the Justice Department go after, being weaponized to go after journalists and politicians on the other side.
There's an aide to Mike Pence who says she knows him. He really means it.
He does really mean it. It's Mark Short. Yeah, he says that. Yeah.
So I have a question for you, Nina Burleigh, because we've unfortunately run out of time. This has been just marvelous. But my question is, will the conviction of Donald Trump, in your view, block his path to the White House?
I think it potentially does, yeah.
You think it does?
I do.
Okay. So, Nina Burleigh, thank you so much for coming by. Wonderful to see you again.
Always good to see you.
And thank you for coming by. Tune in next week for more conversations. I'm Jim Zirin. Meanwhile, be well, take care, and all the best.